Welcome to Reddit Aliens. What's your I didn't believe in ghosts until paranormal story? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Years ago, my husband and I were trying to see if we could get a modest house by contract for deed. We took my sister along to look at the house. It still had someone's personal effects in it as though they had just stepped out, but was for sale. We walked all through and were hopeful. Suddenly my sister said, "Wait, I know whose house this was. This house belonged to that guy my son knew who died in his kitchen. This was Tony's house." At that precise moment, a cabinet door shot open and whacked her on the backside. Never one to be rattled easily, she looked up and said, "Okay, Tony, I get it." We checked. It was indeed his house. The cabinet had been tightly shut and the floor was stable. I've never seen a cabinet door randomly swing open with a force behind it like that. Not enough to hurt, but fast, as though a hand had whipped it open. You had to be there. I wish we could have gotten the house even if he was haunting it. He was known to be a nice guy, very funny, and we wouldn't have minded sharing it with him. When I was in college, I lived in these really old dorms, like hadn't been renovated in over 70 years, and the thermostat looked like the first version of one. We each had our own key card to the place. This is important for later. The doors automatically lock behind you the moment they shut. The bedroom is designed in the cabinets lying close to the ceiling of each bedroom. There is also a mirror and a dresser space. Anyways, winter break came around, and I decided to stay back while both of my roommates went home. It was just me and my dog for the next week or so. Both of my roommates went home to the other states, so I knew there was no way they would be home at any point earlier than they said they would be. A couple of days into me being alone, I was taking a shower with the bathroom door open. I heard what sounded like a door slam in our dorm room. I peeked my head out of the curtain and called out "hello" and called my roommates' names. No one answered. I kinda shrugged it off. A couple of nights later, I was getting ready for bed when again I heard a loud slam from one of my roommates' rooms. I froze, and my dog started going ballistic, and she hid under the bed. Mind you, my dog had never hid before, and she weighed over 60 pounds. I called out again, and even texted my roommate to ask if she had come home. She said she hadn't. Her bedroom was locked up, so I couldn't get in there. I assumed it must have been housing maintenance doing something somewhere in the building. Now that I think back at 9 p.m. at night, honestly, doesn't make sense, but I wasn't worried about it still. I kinda forgot about the situation until a week later. My roommate came into my room, face pale. She asked if I had been in her room. I said there was no way and asked why. She told me to come look. My roommate had fairy lights strung up in her room she never turned off. They'd been cut, both in the middle, and were hanging, and the two cabinet doors had fallen off, which was the slam I must have heard that night. They lay on the floor. However, the oddest part was they were stacked one on top of the other, and not underneath the cabinet that was missing them, but to the right of it. It was honestly the most bizarre thing I'd ever seen. We asked housing if anyone had been in our apartment during that time frame, and they said no. Ever since that point, I had other weird experiences in that dorm from time to time. My dog got spooked every now and then after the incident during winter break, and I was happy to leave when the time came. When I was 10, me, my mom, and my twin brother were driving in the car. When we were on the main road, the car turned off. The only thing left on was the radio. The radio was playing my uncle's favorite song. He'd been dead for almost 8 years now. The car would not turn back on until the song finished. Still a good song though. For context, I believe to this day that the vast majority of, not all, paranormal videos and photos have a plausible explanation outside of the paranormal. This means that these videos and photos can be easily explained away as either CG, poor quality cameras, pareidolia, or as outright fakes. Needless to say, I do believe that there still can be paranormal shit that happens. However, at the time when this happened about 8 years ago, and when I didn't believe in ghosts as much, my family and I were staying at the Fort Garry Hotel in Winnipeg, Manitoba. I had a few spare moments and decided to explore the hotel because it is absolutely beautiful. I got lost as I usually do in buildings since I get directionally challenged the moment I step into one. Anyways, I happened to run into someone that looked like they worked for the hotel but weren't house cleaning or a clerk, so I was unsure of their position or job. I asked for directions back to the lobby, since I had to meet my family in a few minutes. The moment I arrived in the lobby and walked past the front desk, a clerk and a security guard were staring at me in shock and pale-faced. The security guard asked me who I was talking with earlier for the directions back to the lobby. I told him I thought it was someone who worked at the hotel. Well, wouldn't you know, it turns out that floor I was on, I can't remember it for the life of me, has a bunch of paranormal shit that goes on regularly. I don't know if he was supposed to, but the security guard showed me the footage he had just seen. The person I was talking with never appeared on the security feed, even though they should have been in plain view. It was super creepy, because I had shaken this person's hand for some reason, and the footage just showed me shaking hands with the air. The person appeared in front of me, as any other person would have. When I touched their hand, it felt like any squishy person's would normally, and yet they never showed up on the footage. There was no way I could have blocked out the person from view of the camera, either, as I'm only 5'6". The security guard even pulled up a second angle for further proof. No one believes me, despite the footage. To this day, I still don't know how to explain it. Well, I appreciate you introducing with your candor and honesty about the possibility of paranormal, but being skeptical at the same time. But if you had a situation like that happen, you should probably believe. Babysitting my niece when she was 2 years old. The place was a very old house my sister was renting, built in the 1930s. I'm alone in the place with her while my sister is working overnight. It's about 11 p.m. and she's been asleep for a couple of hours at this point. I'm watching TV in the living room and see her running down the dark hallway. Stops just before the entryway to the living room, and I jokingly said, "You better get back to bed or I'm gonna get you," and got up to get her back in bed. I turned the hallway lights on and her bedroom door is still closed. Weird. So I open it to find my niece completely passed out in her bed, drooling and everything. It wasn't my niece I saw in the hallway, so I took her to sleep with me that night. It's pretty effing stupid. The TV would randomly turn on and switch to the news. I'd turn it off and it'd automatically turn back on after like half a minute and go to the news. I'd switch it to Dr. Phil or Judge Judy or something, and I'd switch back to the news. This happened every night around 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. for about a month. 5 years later, and I still think a ghost was looking for a place to live. When I took a shower at 7 a.m., when my two roommates were sleeping, there was a very distinct knock at the door as soon as I turned the shower off. I didn't respond because I figured the shower turning off was enough of an indicator. I was ready to leave the bathroom and heard another knock at the door and quickly opened the door to let them know I was done and no one was there. I was in my bedroom getting ready 10 minutes later and there was a knock on the door, and then it just opened, slowly. My roommate's door hadn't opened, nor had they been awake. We were taking a tour of the Battleship, Massachusetts in Falls River for my girlfriend's 30th birthday. She wanted to do scary stuff and I wanted to see museums, so we stayed at the Lizzie Borden house and the next night at the Shane Lee Hotel. I didn't mention personally feeling any definitive paranormal activity at each location, but there were definitely signs. The one place I actually wanted to go that wasn't meant to have any paranormal activity was the ship. While we were touring the bathroom or cafeteria area, I was snooping around the shower, just curious, when I got tapped on the shoulder. Thinking it was my girlfriend, I turned around and no one was there. She was a few rooms away, and we were the only two people in the area. Nothing was hanging above me or leaking. The area was a little cool, and it just felt like as if a human touched my shoulder, and I'm 100% certain it happened. I found it ironic, considering the other places we had been were known for their ghost activity. I was raised a skeptic, so I tend to lean towards things having a logical answer, but there's been a couple instances I still couldn't explain entirely until recently. The most recent was hearing my cabinet door slam closed in the kitchen while I was in the bedroom. But before I moved to where I'm at now, I lived with my ex-fiance at the time, and he would often be at work while I was home due to opposite schedules. So, one of the times I was relaxing in the bedroom at night, my dog and I both heard this woman's voice clear as day as if it were right outside my bedroom door, go, "Jeez." So I panicked and listened for a bit and heard nothing else. Went outside with the dog and saw nobody. Then promptly told my ex what had happened, and to lighten the situation a bit, we named her Jeez Louise. Turns out though, when I'm sleep deprived, I get visual and auditory hallucinations super easily. So pretty much, and ghostly experiences I've had since then, I just chalk it up to that. When I was 3, my grandfather passed away. I don't really remember him at all. I know exactly what he looks like though, as my grandma still has pictures of him all around her house, and I've seen the home videos of him and myself and my younger sister when she came along, of him playing with us and him lighting my candle at my first birthday, that sort of thing. There is an exception though. For years I've had this random memory that must have occurred only a few months or so before his passing, because I'm pretty sure in this memory I was 3 or very close to it, and my sister was around a year old. I have this very vivid memory of myself sitting at a kitchen bench and my sister in her high chair, and my granddad playing pop-up behind the kitchen bench. Like he would duck down behind the bench and doing a big pop-up surprise, making a different funny face each time. I was laughing and my baby sister was doing the typical baby big laughing. It's nothing special in what happened or what went down, but yet it's so strong and vivid. Now, despite how vivid and strong that memory is, I was never sure if it actually happened. Like I said, I was only 3. I barely remember my granddad, and apart from that memory, the only things I really know about him are stories from my mom and grandma and from the home videos. I could totally be making it up, which is very possible given what we know about memories from young childhood fading or being twisted in the sense that we misremember or even have completely fake memories. Flash forward to last year when I was pregnant with my first, and my friend group were talking about my family and what do they think of baby will look like, etc. I talked about my granddad, how I barely remember him, but I have this one memory that goes like this, but I'm not sure if it's really real, etc., blah blah blah. That night, after catching up with my friends, I had an incredibly vivid dream. In this dream, the memory was being reenacted. I was watching my granddad pop up and down behind the counter, making funny faces and making me and my sister laugh, as I remember. But after the 5th or 6th time of him doing it, he pops up, but becomes serious, and looks directly at me. He tells me that yes, this really did happen. He loved playing this game with us girls. He's happy I remember this, and don't worry, I'm not making a false memory. Everything is all good. I'm not superstitious. While I'm open to the idea of ghosts and the supernatural, there is still a large part of me that is very skeptical. And a part of me does think that dream was just a figment of my subconscious's imagination. But I also do think my granddad came to me in that dream that night to reassure me and confirm that memory was real. Maybe not fall into the realm of paranormal as some of these other stories, as it was a dream, but to dream of a passed on relative in such a nice, warm way is really awesome. Have you ever had any dreams of passed on relatives? When I was in college, I lived in an apartment complex. Every once in a while, at like 2 in the morning, I would hear breaking glass. It was clear as day when it happened. There was no doubt it was a window breaking. Never found any broken glass anywhere around the apartment. My younger brother would come out and party with us, and once or twice he came busting into my room thinking someone was breaking in. Finally one night my girlfriend stayed over. She would kick and push in her sleep, and at some point nudged me and I woke up. When I looked over at her, she wasn't asleep. She was sitting at the foot of the bed, facing away from me. When I said her name, she stood up and walked out of the room. Glass break. I looked around and realized that she was still laying next to me in bed. That was the only time I saw anything in that place, but heard the sounds pretty consistently. Not very paranormal, but I live a few minutes away from an office building that used to be an insane asylum. My mom and I used to volunteer at the animal shelter, which was also very close by to both our house and said building, so naturally they would sometimes hold volunteer meetings inside. The first thing I noticed was how much the building still smelled like a hospital. It looked like one too, despite having been repurposed many years ago. I don't usually care too much for ghosts, but when I say I could not breathe the entire time we were inside that building, I mean it. I was hyperventilating, couldn't stop fidgeting, and my heart was beating incredibly fast, sort of like an adrenaline rush, like my body sensed the danger I couldn't see. I still feel hints of those sensations whenever we drive past that building, and I can't explain why I felt that way back then, but needless to say, I've never and will never set foot in that place again. I've never believed in spirits or ghosts, even though I live by a graveyard. One day I was helping my dad do yard work with my sisters at my dead grandma's house, who passed away about 5 years ago in 2016. We got bored, so we asked our dad if we could go play in the path by the railroad tracks right beside the graveyard. Our dad said yes, and when we were halfway down the path, we needed clippers, and my sister left them. She turned back and went to go grab them. I kept going when she was gone, and while I was walking, I saw something running towards me, and it wasn't an animal. It looked like it had a white shirt. I hesitated for a second and ran as fast as I possibly could, screaming for my life. I looked back while I was running and saw nothing. I told my sister and my dad, but they didn't believe me. When we went back down the path, I smelled something dead. We found nothing, but it still to this day smells like a dead human, and it still scares me to this day. I was babysitting a friend's baby 3 years ago, and it was around 3 months old. They went on a date night while I stayed and made sure the baby didn't die, I guess. Around 2 a.m. I checked the baby monitor, and to my horror, I saw a hand in the crib. I knew I was home alone, and it was a small house anyway. I grabbed a baseball bat from my shed and ran in there and turned the light on. Nothing there, but I made the baby cry. I know I saw something. I wasn't even tired or high or anything. I couldn't sleep knowing that I saw something there. I took the baby and put it in the same bed as me and slept. He started getting very fussy whenever I tried putting him back in the crib. At 4 a.m. I couldn't sleep and looked at the baby monitor and saw 2 hands now in the crib. And I'm not taking the piss right now, but I swear one of the hands had their finger up. I told the parents and they thought I was just tired. So I have to avoid the paranormal for a second and just discuss the main point of this to me. You babysat a 3-month-old baby overnight so his parents could go away for a night? You might be the greatest friend of all time. Also, I don't know many parents who would leave a 3-month-old with anybody. Okay, so this didn't happen to me, but to a close friend. She was living with 2 other people in a flat with 2 rooms. The bigger room was shared by 2 people, and the smaller one was taken up by another. Weirdly, anyone who used to sleep in the small room had difficulty sleeping. They all tried sleeping in that room one by one, but no matter which person slept there, they always ended up with a restless night. They didn't think much of it until one day they had friends over for a sleepover and were hanging out in the bigger room. The girl who was sitting near the door of the small room heard someone whisper, "Why are you leaving me alone tonight?" She freaked out and told everyone, but they all thought it's because they were all high and she's imagining stuff. But after that incident, they became super conscious of their surroundings and started noticing stuff like weird sounds or a feeling that someone is behind you when you are all alone. But this isn't even the worst that happened to them. So they decided to leave that place. On the day they were moving their stuff out, the girl went to the small room, and as she was about to grab her bag from under the bed, it got stuck, and she heard someone saying this in a crying voice, "Please don't leave me. Everyone who has stayed here has left. I really like you. Don't leave me." And it doesn't end there. She was obviously freaking and called her friends crying, and basically she had a panic attack. But somehow her friends convinced her to go back with them to that place to get the remaining stuff. Everything went comparatively well that day, till the point they were about to step out of the door, and that same bag got stuck again. There was nothing on the floor, and it got stuck. No matter how much they tried to move it, it didn't. That's when everyone was majorly freaked out. They ran out of there, leaving all their stuff there, and left without looking back or even locking the door. A couple of years ago, I was 23 at the time. I was still living with my parents. I was up upstairs in my bedroom, hanging out in my room and watching TV. I was on the phone with my friend at the time, and while I was on the phone, I exited my room and went downstairs to have a cigarette. The only other person in my parents' house that day was my dad, who later I found out was asleep in his room on the main level. Anyway, I was gone for about 7 minutes, and I walked back upstairs and entered my bedroom. I was still on the phone at the time, and I walked towards my bed and sat down. Eventually, after 20 seconds or so, I glanced back up to play my TV, and there at the end of my bed was a piece of paper sticking up from the base. I just remembered not understanding what I was seeing, and never in my life have I so quickly dropped dead silent. I say, dropped dead silent, in a way to try to explain what it feels like when you're coming to terms with something your brain isn't ready or fully capable of understanding. I just remember going, "Nate?" And he kept saying, What? And I could hardly speak. I quickly said, "I'll call him back," and immediately took out my phone and took a picture. I took a picture before doing anything else, before I even studied what the piece of paper was. Before I did anything at all, I took a picture. I took a picture because I couldn't believe my eyes. I don't know how it got there, why it was placed the way it was, and why it looked the way it did. I'm getting goosebumps right now. Anyway, it was an old economics paper of mine talking about the government and the divide our two-party system creates in America. I wrote this econ paper 3 years prior in a college intro to econ class. There was originally 2 pages to it, but it was missing its second page. The edges of the page were burnt, and there was a big yellow triangle that almost looked like it was highlighted on, smack dab in the middle of the page. It almost looked luminescent, or like a dollar bill does. Anyhow, it absolutely scared the F out of me. That paper had to have been in my closet stacked away with all my other schoolwork, and now it was ripped from the other page and was placed at the edge of my bed, sticking upright, for me to see. I was gone for only 7 minutes. Nobody could have done that. It was absolutely impossible. Shortly after that bizarre situation occurred, I dodged the hell out of my parents' house and went to a hotel with a friend of mine. The second part of the story is just as scary, but I don't even want to get into that right now. Anyway, I still wish I knew what it meant. I can't tell if it was good or bad. I don't know what the symbolism was, why the paper had weird burns around the edges, and what the F the large luminescent triangle meant. I still don't know why or how, but my concept and understanding of the world has changed ever since. I was only gone for 7 minutes. I work in a hotel that was built in 1885, so I have plenty of stories, but one that still gives me goosebumps would be the time I was vacuuming. It had randomly stopped while I was halfway through cleaning the room. I thought the plug had fallen out of the socket, so I went to plug it back in, but it was in fine. So I checked the vacuum itself, and it was switched off, but there, it had been right behind me the whole time. I switched it back on, thinking I had just bumped the switch with the hose, but after a few seconds, it turned back off again. I went back and forth, fighting with whatever spirit was there to keep it on, but after about 3 or 4 times, I gave up and left the room, and went on to the next one where it worked fine, and continued to work well for the remainder of the cleans. Whoever was in there obviously thought it was funny to play jokes, as I never felt afraid while in there. And for anyone wondering, I did manage to make it back in there and finish cleaning before more guests arrived.